Welcome back, everyone. You know you're here for a good deep dive. And today, we've got something really special lined up. We're going to be looking at this essay, The Glory of the Impossible.
Yeah, it's quite a title.
It is. Written by a guy named Samuel Zwemer.
Oh, Zwemer.
Published back in 1911.
1911, okay.
As part of the Student Volunteer Movement collection of writings. Now, Zwemer is a pretty interesting guy. To understand the essay, I think we got to understand a little bit about him first.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he spent a lot of his life working with the Arabian mission. He was really focused on engaging with the Muslim world. And he even founded and edited this journal called The Muslim World for a long time.
Wow.
He was a big deal in those early missionary conferences, like a real leader in the evangelical movement at the time.
A pretty influential figure.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So what we want to do today is kind of take apart this essay, right?
Yeah.
Figure out what he's saying, this really passionate call to action he has about what he calls the unoccupied fields of the world.
Unoccupied fields.
What did that even mean back then? You know, what was he talking about? What were the specific challenges he was facing? And maybe, we can even think about how some of that connects to, I don't know, the impossible stuff we're dealing with today.
Okay, yeah.
What do you think?
I'm into it. Let's do it.
So let's unpack this glory of the impossible. Where do we even start?
Well, I think Zwemer's argument is actually, at its core, pretty simple.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean it's easy, right?
Okay.
He basically believed that if you're going to tackle these unoccupied fields, the places where Christianity hadn't really taken root yet, you absolutely needed a massive amount of faith. And he thought that kind of faith, like real deep faith, would inevitably lead to, real sacrifice.
Makes sense.
He was so sure that this unwavering faith, this complete trust in God, was the key to taking things that seemed impossible, like these huge obstacles, and making them happen, turning them into reality.
So it sounds like he wasn't messing around, right? Like he really believed this stuff.
Oh, totally. And he didn't shy away from the seriousness of it all either. I mean, he even talked about missionary work like it was a kind of war.
Whoa.
Yeah, a spiritual war. He straight up asks, does it really matter how many die or how much money we spend in opening closed doors if we really believe that missions are warfare and that the king's glory is at stake?
The king's glory.
Right. I mean, that phrase says it all, this is about God's ultimate power and honor. It's huge.
That's some intense stuff right there.
It really is. What's striking to me about that question, though, is how forceful it is. It makes you think about how deeply he believed in what he was doing. If you truly believed that spreading the gospel was the most important thing, then yeah, maybe the cost, even if it meant people dying or spending tons of money, maybe that wouldn't seem so important compared to achieving that goal.
So the ends justify the means.
Well, I don't think he was saying that exactly. It's more about the weight of the mission. I think it puts everything else into perspective.
It makes you think, for sure. So it's not just about faith then, it's about sacrifice too, right?
Yeah, definitely. He actually uses this super intense analogy comparing missionary work to the siege of Port Arthur during the Russo-Japanese War.
Okay.
Port Arthur was this strategically crucial place, really tough to conquer. A lot of people thought it was impossible to take, but in the end, it fell, but at a tremendous cost. Huge loss of life, And Zwemer was saying, if taking Port Arthur required what he called human bullets.
Human bullets, that's a rough image.
It is, right? But his point is, if we're going to conquer as he put it, the Port Arthurs and Gibraltars of the non-Christian world, we've got to be prepared for that level of difficulty, for loss, for hardship.
So the stakes are high and there's a price to pay.
Right. And he doesn't stop there with the sacrifice idea. He goes on to say that these unoccupied fields must have their Calvary before they can have their Pentecost.
What does that even mean?
It's heavy stuff, He's essentially saying that before these places can experience a real spiritual awakening, a kind of outpouring of the Holy Spirit like Pentecost, there has to be suffering, deep and real, like the suffering of Jesus on Calvary.
So there's this cost, a spiritual price tag on this whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just about going out there and preaching. It's about being willing to give everything, to lose everything, even your life, for the sake of the mission.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. But then he talks about this thing called inverted homesickness.
Right.
What's that all about? It sounds kind of backwards.
It is kind of a weird concept, right?
Yeah.
He's building on the ideas of this theologian named P.T. Forsyth. And he describes it as this deep shift that happens in a missionary's heart. Like, they basically unlearn the love for their home, their homeland, and they become so connected to the people they serve, to their mission field, that they long to return there even after death. It's like their home isn't on earth anymore. Their true home is with God and with the people they've dedicated their lives to.
So it's not really homesickness then, is it? It's more like...
It's like a longing for the place where they feel most connected to God's purpose, you know? Where their work is, where the people they love are. It's deeper than just missing a physical place.
Wow. And he gives all these examples of people who seem to embody this, right?
Oh, yeah. Like James Gilmore in Mongolia, David Livingstone in Africa, Grenfell in the Congo, Keith Falconer in Arabia, all these people who devoted their lives to these hard, often really remote places.
It's like their real home, the place they truly belonged, became the very place they were working, giving their lives for.
Exactly. It's like their passion for the people and the work took over everything else. Zwemer says, in this passion, all other passions died. Before this vision, all other visions faded. This call drowned all other voices. It's pretty powerful.
Wow, it's like they were totally consumed by their mission.
Yeah, absolutely. They were all in.
So he's got this concept of faith, he's got sacrifice, he's got this intense kind of longing, and then he talks about what he calls the pioneer spirit.
Right, the pioneer spirit.
Like these guys are, what does he call them, forelopers of God?
Yeah, the forelopers of God. He's talking about those who go first, who forge the path, who face the hardship and resistance head on.
But they're not going in with guns blazing, are they?
No, he's very specific about that. He says they advance with the sword of the Spirit and with the fire of truth. It's a spiritual battle they're fighting.
Okay, so they're armed with faith, essentially.
Right. They're armed with faith, with conviction, with the power of their message. They're the ones pushing the boundaries, going where no one has gone before.
I mean, who are we talking about here? Like, who are these pioneers?
He gives a few examples, but one that stands out is Bishop Thomas Valpy French.
Okay.
This guy, Dr. Eugene Stock, who is a big name in missions himself, called French the most distinguished of all Church Missionary Society missionaries.
Wow, high praise.
Right. And Zwemer tells us that French, after like 40 years of super successful work in India, decided to resign his position to go to the interior of Arabia.
Arabia. Why Arabia?
Back then, it was basically uncharted territory for missions. It was dangerous, it was difficult, but it was also a place where almost no one was spreading the Christian message.
So he was drawn to the challenge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And get this, when Mackay of Uganda put out a call for volunteers, French was ready to go, even at 66 years old.
66.
Most people are thinking about retiring at that age, but French was like, nope, I'm going to Arabia and I'm going alone. And even right before he died, he was still saying, I shall not give up my plans for the interior.
That's some serious dedication.
It is. It's humbling, you know, to think that even facing all that, even at that age, he was still so committed. It shows you just how powerful this drive to reach the unreached can be.
So we've got faith, sacrifice, longing, and this pioneer spirit. It's a lot to take in.
It is, but it's not over yet.
Yeah.
Zwemer also talks about what he calls apostolic ambition.
Okay. Apostolic ambition. Another big concept.
Right. And this is where he connects all of this back to the Bible, to the early church.
Okay, how so?
Well, he argues that this desire to go beyond what's comfortable, beyond the established areas, to reach those regions beyond, it's not some crazy idea or a fantasy. It's rooted in the example of the apostles, especially Paul.
Interesting.
Yeah, he points to Paul's letter to the Romans, where Paul talks about his ambition to preach the gospel in places where Christ hasn't been heard of. And Zwemer says, look, if the apostles were focused on reaching the edges of the Roman Empire, which was like the whole world to them back then, shouldn't we in the 20th century be even more ambitious? Shouldn't our goal be to reach every single unoccupied field, no matter how hard it is?
So he's saying we should be even bolder than the apostles.
In a way, yes. He's saying we have the same calling, the same mission, but on a global scale.
Makes sense.
And he contrasts this apostolic ambition with what he calls a calculating spirit, which is basically the idea of just focusing on what's right in front of you, on the immediate needs, maybe just on your own community. He says the early church was actually excited by the bigness of the task, by the challenge of it all.
They weren't scared off by it.
Not at all. He even quotes this guy Nisima from Japan, who talked about how sometimes obstacles can actually lead to faster growth, which is pretty interesting, right?
Yeah, that's kind of counterintuitive.
Right. But it makes sense when you think about it. When things are hard, you have to be more resourceful, more creative, more determined.
So this calculating spirit, this playing it safe, it's not really in the spirit of the early church.
Yeah, exactly. Zwemer is saying we need to be willing to take risks, to push the boundaries, to step out in faith, even when it seems impossible.
Okay, I'm with you so far. But what about those times when, things just don't seem to be working? What about when you face setbacks, discouragement, even failure?
Well, Zwemer talks about that too. He says hope and patience are absolutely essential in this work.
Of course.
He tells this amazing story about a missionary named Hogberg who was working in Central Asia. At first, Hogberg couldn't even get a handful of people to listen to him. It was like hitting a wall. But he kept at it. He didn't lose hope. And eventually, things started to change. People became more open, more receptive. It was like the ground had been prepared.
It's like that saying, the darkest hour is just before the dawn.
Exactly. And then there's that classic story about Adoniram Judson in Burma. He was imprisoned, and someone was mocking him about the chances of anyone converting to Christianity there.
Oh, I think I've heard of Judson. He was a missionary in Burma for a long time, right?
Yeah, and he faced some serious challenges. But when he was taunted about the likelihood of seeing conversions, he replied, "The prospects are as bright as are the promises of God."
Wow, what a response.
Right, to talk about unwavering faith. He was saying basically that God's promises are sure, even if the current circumstances look bleak.
So it's about the long game, about trusting in something bigger than the immediate results.
Yeah, and not letting discouragement or doubt get in the way of the mission.
Zwemer also says this really interesting thing that the closed door challenges him who has a right to enter. What do you make of that?
I think he's saying that difficulty, resistance, even outright rejection, those things shouldn't be seen as reasons to give up. They should be seen as like an invitation, a test of your commitment. If you truly believe you're supposed to be somewhere doing something, then the obstacles you face just become part of the journey.
It's like the harder it is, the more important it must be.
In a way, yeah. And he backs this up with a quote from Robert E. Speer, who was a big figure in missions. Speer said that achieving the evangelization of the world in this generation would demand a huge amount of self-sacrifice.
So he's saying that if we're serious about this, about reaching everyone with the gospel message, we have to be willing to give up a lot.
Exactly. And it's not just about giving up material things. It's about giving up comfort, security, maybe even your own plans and ambitions.
This reminds me of what he says later in the essay about making a life, not a living.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
He's appealing to people who might be feeling like their lives are missing something, like they're not fulfilling their potential. And he says, look, these unoccupied fields, these difficult places, these are the places where you can really make a difference, where you can live a life that truly matters.
And he brings up a quote from Bishop Brent to support that idea. Brent said, "We need an adventure of some proportions to truly discover our purpose."
An adventure of some proportions.
I like that.
So it's not just about doing good, it's about finding fulfillment, finding meaning in life.
Right. And he uses the examples of like Christian college graduates, young doctors, people with skills and talents who could be making a big impact in these underserved communities.
And he's suggesting they might find more satisfaction doing that than they would in a more traditional, comfortable career path.
Exactly. It's about using your gifts for something bigger than yourself, something that really makes a difference in the world.
And then there's that quote from Bishop Phillips Brooks. It's so good. He says, we should pray not for easier tasks, but for stronger abilities.
Yeah, that's a great one. It's like he's saying, don't shy away from the challenge. Embrace it. Let it make you stronger, better, more capable.
It's a whole different way of thinking about success, isn't it?
Totally. It's not about avoiding difficulty. It's about growing through difficulty. It's about becoming the kind of person who can handle the tough stuff, who can make a real impact even when things are hard.
And then, to wrap it all up, Zwemer brings in the perspective of David Livingstone.
Livingstone, yeah.
In his famous address at Cambridge, Livingstone basically said that all those years he spent in Africa, all the hardship, all the struggle, it wasn't a sacrifice at all.
What?
Yeah, he called it a privilege.
Wow.
He said it was a small part of a great debt owing to our God.
That's really powerful. It completely flips the script, doesn't it?
It does. It makes you think about what we consider a sacrifice, what we're willing to give up for something we believe in.
And he talks about the rewards of this kind of work, not in terms of money or fame, but in terms of healthful activity, the consciousness of doing good, peace of mind, and a bright hope of a glorious destiny.
So the real reward is internal, spiritual even.
Right. It's about finding fulfillment and serving something larger than yourself.
And then he ends that address with these words: I go back to Africa to try to make an open path for commerce and Christianity. Carry out the work which I have begun. I leave it with you.
That's a call to action if I've ever heard one.
It is. He's basically saying, this is the work, this is the mission, now is your turn.
And those words coming from Livingstone, a man who lived what he preached, is pretty inspiring.
It really is. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the glory of the impossible, there are a few things that really stand out. Zwemer's emphasis on faith, on the power of believing in something even when it seems impossible. The idea that sacrifice is necessary, but that it can be a privilege, not a burden. This call to reach those unoccupied fields, to go where others haven't gone before, and this whole redefinition of what sacrifice really means.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. And, the world was different in 1911 when he wrote this. There were actual, literal, unoccupied fields on the map. But the principles he talks about, they still feel relevant today, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. It makes you wonder, what are the unoccupied fields of our time?
That's a good question.
Maybe it's not about geographical places anymore. Maybe it's about the neglected communities in our own societies, the really tough problems we're facing that seem impossible to solve. Maybe it's even about those areas where we need fresh ideas, new perspectives, where people are afraid to go because it seems too hard, too risky.
I like that. It's like, what are the impossible tasks that are calling out to us right here, right now? Where do we need to step up and be those forelopers of God, armed with faith and a willingness to sacrifice?
Exactly. What are the things that seem impossible but that we're called to do anyway? Where do we need to make a life, not a living?
Good question.
Big questions. But I think that's what Zwemer wanted us to wrestle with. He wanted to challenge us to think bigger, to dream bigger, and to be willing to do the hard things, the seemingly impossible things, for the sake of something greater than ourselves.
And even though the world has changed a lot since 1911, one thing hasn't changed. That human desire to make a difference, to leave a mark, to be part of something bigger than ourselves.
It's still there, that spark. It might look different, it might be expressed in different ways, but it's still there. And I think that's what Zwemer was tapping into, this deep human longing to make a difference in the world.
Absolutely. It's a powerful thing.
It is. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it thought-provoking, challenging, maybe even inspiring. We'll see you next time.